So, welcome to part three of Personal Growth Strategy for Entrepreneurs. And this is a new series where I'm talking to entrepreneurs who do want to understand about how their emotions work and how negative thinking affects them, how it affects your behavior. And for me, there's a big cycle between thinking, feeling, and your behaviors. And I call that my T cycle, which I do share as a strategy for breaking some of the thinking. But for now, I just want to continue with looking at the whole concept of thinking. Everything starts with a thought. That's been the main premise of the way I've worked with clients. So I shall continue. So, just a tiny bit about me. I'm an emotional intelligence coach and a mentor, also qualified psychotherapist in the UK. And I've also released a book, 2021, called Navigating Stress, released during COVID to help everyone to get through that terrible time that we had. What I now do is I work with business owners and I also work with entrepreneurs who do care about their emotional intelligence and growing that and the self-awareness that's needed to run a business or at least to start one up. And it's about becoming psychologically strong, which for me is the emotional and the mental strength that's needed. I apply a lot of things to me because I also run a business, and it's to avoid the overwhelm and the anxiety that happens when things are going, let's say, not the way you want it to. And then the feelings that you get, overwhelming feelings of wanting to give up. So they happen for me. I'm very honest about my feelings and sharing that with everyone else because I think there is definitely some room in this world of social media for being a bit more honest about what happens to us. So we don't all think that we're the only ones who are experiencing problems. So, just a recap of the previous sessions in the training part one, we looked at what is a thought. It was really important just to address what is a thought. And I've created a little image here, the what, where, when, why, little brain that's always asking questions. And that could be perceived as one unit of thought. I've also then looked at how thoughts become beliefs and how we file things away in that subconscious storage called our brain. In part two, I looked at, in a little bit more detail at negative automatic thinking and the thought habits and patterns. And I was talking about how my 7-year-old self had lots and lots of thoughts. And unfortunately, some of her thinking is still in me, and I take her to work instead of the adult sometimes. So self-awareness is where we're at on this one. And today's session is going to be 35 minutes with about 5 to 10 minutes Q&A, as much or as little as you want. And I'm going to be, again, looking at automatic thinking. I think it's a big concept that we should all grasp so we're able to stop ourselves and rethink things and then move on. Because I know that it can lead to anxiety and stress and depression. And these are the places we want to avoid so that we're not out of action for too long. I'm going to be raising your awareness and your self-awareness around these automatic routines that we have in life, a life script. Let's call it a life script or a life story. And again, that will stop you from growing. And I will provide a resource at the end so you can add it to your own personal growth toolkit. I like to use a lot of entrepreneurial terms. Add to your lifetime value for the planet. So we talk a lot about lifetime value when we're looking at working with clients. How long are we going to be working with them for? What's the lifetime value from looking after them? And that goes for any kind of client that you have. But I want you to look at your lifetime value for the planet. I think that's where we should be focusing our attention. Before we do go any further, is automatic thinking a real phenomena? Is it just a phrase that you hear and you think to yourself, what on earth is that woman talking about? Automatic thinking? No, I just think. I don't have any automatic thinking. We do have 50 to 70,000 thoughts. That's an awful lot of thinking that we can have, and they're done on a daily basis. Not all of them are true, which is another big thing. And a lot of them are recycled thoughts. So it's the same thought that we're repeating to ourselves over and over again. And again, that is a big issue. I like to do a rating before we get into the full talk. I want you to ask yourself, do you believe that you have harmful automatic thinking habits? And this is kind of a yes and no answer, but also let's make it a bit more nuanced and add in a scale of 1 to 10. And if you're down the end of 2 and 1, you're not very, very sure whether that is a thing or not. And if you're at the other end of the scale, you're a 10, then you're saying, "Yeah, absolutely, Joy. Of course it's a thing. I'm with you on that." So just take a moment just to think about what number you might have. And again, I'm always curious to find out what that number might be. So please drop that into the chat box and I will have a look at it now and try and work out what's going on. We've got sevens, nines, fives. Right, lovely. Okay, a nice range of numbers there. And I'm going to be asking you this question at the end of today as well, so that you can assess whether anything has changed, whether I've actually added to your knowledge or not. So, do you ever do this? And I'm going to look at two scenarios, and I want you just to think about the automatic nature of it. Scenario one. Now, do you ever find yourself driving automatically to a location? You set out knowing where you were going, and then you end up where you don't want to be. That's happened to me. I don't think we're driving without paying attention. We're probably paying complete attention. And I don't know, has that ever happened to anyone else, or am I on my own on this one? So just drop a Y or a yes in the comments, and I'll have a quick check and just see if that happens to anyone else, or it's just me. It could just well be me, couldn't it? Got a yes, yes. Okay, I'm not on my own with that. Good. And it's quite surprising, isn't it? Because we kind of catch ourselves and think, oh, how did I end up here? Or we have to course correct halfway on our journey because we've gone off in the wrong direction. Now, scenario two is a strange one. I go to lots of different places and different people's homes as well. And have you ever tried to open a door and pushed it instead of pulled? Now, a nice image here of someone struggling to push a door or struggling to pull a door. But the real situation here is that the door system is the opposite to the way that you are familiar with. And it's interesting when people put hinges on doors the wrong way around. So you might enter a room and expect the door to open inwards, but you've actually got to pull it towards you. Now, again, this may be just a me thing, but has this happened to anyone else? I'd be curious to know if I'm on my own with this one. And what do daily automatic thinking habits actually look like and sound like? Let's get into some more ideas so we can begin to attach what I'm saying to some of the real events that are happening to you in your life. Now, this could be a typical daily routine for us. This is the soundtrack, and it's just continuous soundtrack. It's a big mush, but this is how it feels in the brain. I must wake up. You might hit the snooze alarm again. I wonder what's on my phone. Some people check their phones first thing. I'm not one of them, but my partner does. I deserve 15 more minutes to have a nap. Well, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Can I get away with not having a wash? Occasionally, I mean, it sounds awful, doesn't it? But I wash my face, do everything else. But sometimes I'm in a rush. You think, I'm just not going to bother. Wish I was like Steve Jobs. He wore a black t-shirt and black trousers to try and cut down on any of the overthinking required about getting dressed, because it does take up a lot of thinking. I've got to go and wake the kids. If you have children, you might say, oh, no breakfast for me. I'm on a diet, but I'm so hungry. You might also notice that I have a toothache. And every time I brush my teeth, it's a real ouch. For women and possibly men, if they like this, they put on a bit of makeup. What a chore. I find makeup an absolute chore nowadays. Another question, why are we always running late for school if it's the kid, or just running late to get out the door if it's just you by yourself? You might wish that your job was nearer home, because that journey that you're going to have either, by public transport or in your car, you're thinking, oh, it's going to be a long one. You do get onto the road and you start swearing and effing and doing all that kind of thing. Now, I don't like to do that when I'm driving because it disturbs my psyche, as I say, and stops me from being calm. But some people get into a real mood when they drive. Get to work, thank God for coffee, you know, and you might go and talk to your co-workers or your colleagues, and you might be thinking in your head, oh, here we go with some more small talk. It depends on how you get on with them. You might then start to do some work. Why do I get interrupted so often? Comes to close to lunchtime. I think I'll skip lunch. I'm on a diet. Who's invented those things called pointless meetings? You might then begin to think about, oh, that client, am I going to lose them? They've been acting a bit odd. You're running late now. It's coming down to the afternoon. So you phone home to let them know you're going to be a bit late. You get home, you have your dinner in front of the TV again. You remember you've got to walk the dog if you have a dog, and then you wonder if you're going to have a sleepless night, and then it starts all over again. Now, this is a really intense scenario, but this, if we really sit down and think about it, is a normal day. And all these thoughts are churning over very minor, low-level thoughts that are happening. There may be some bigger thoughts that happen during the day, but these are low-level thoughts that do take place. What impact is this having on us? Now, at work, it might sound like this, especially if you are the entrepreneur and you're running your business. I'm not cut out for this kind of stress, especially when things are going badly and suddenly new things happen to you. You might be thinking, I'm just too old or I'm too young to be taken seriously in business. You may have had an encounter with someone and it's triggered that feeling inside of you and that thought. You might think, I'm not a natural born leader. Now, I have that sometimes, even after all the years of working for myself. Sometimes I can get triggered. You might have a nightmare client. You say, I can't say no to them. You also might be having thoughts that no one's interested in me or my products or services, or I really should be working harder, or I should be making more money by now, or my business is going to fail because I'm just not a good salesperson. I had a conversation last week with someone about this. I still find this stage quite difficult. I can't make those sales calls because sometimes I just don't feel like it, which isn't a good answer, but that's the way it feels at the time. So I've also got a free resource. It's 40 thoughts that are bad for business owners. Now, lots of items on that sheet. I'm not expecting you to read that now, just showing you the sheet. And I have dropped the link for this particular PDF into the chat box. What I'm trying to look at is the overall impact of this automatic thinking that we have and the effect it has on the way that we feel, our mood, the effect that it has on our own self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves, and how that then affects our confidence. Because there's a real knock-on effect from just having that one thought. So are automatic thinking habits and patterns good or bad? I think we need a certain level of routine behaviors. I certainly do. And there's a certain amount of automatic thinking that we do need. You don't want to keep on reinventing the wheel. You don't want to wake up and try and remind yourself, how do you make breakfast? Or, oh, how do I drive a car? Or, oh, how do I brush my teeth? So we do need a certain amount of automatic thinking. But I'm looking at the automatic thinking that might be bringing you stress or making you feel overly anxious or preventing you from being the best that you can be. And when we're looking at the world of performance, high performance in business, automatic thinking can become a bit of a thing that holds you back. Every thought that we have and every decision that we make, it requires energy. Now, the body and the brain is demanding energy in order to think. Our brain is about 3 pounds in weight. It does require a lot of energy to think. And I have said in previous sessions that if we were to look at the brain activity, we can see it under an ECG, which is an electroencephalogram. I always have problems saying it, but I'm getting better at saying that word. And we can see that it requires energy. And we can see that thoughts require energy. If we think about all the tasks that we're doing during the day, is it just a micro thought, a micro decision? Is it a medium-sized one? Might require a few more bits of energy. Or is it a very ginormous decision that we have to make? We only have a certain amount of energy in a day. Once you've used it, that's it. You're going to have to rest and you're going to have to recover. So if you do have big plans coming up, don't try and overload yourself with too many, as I would say, low-level tasks. Be careful of negative automatic thoughts that might sneak in and again steal some of this energy that you need. And each thought is being filed away somewhere as an experience to be used for another day. If we think about energy, even that process of one thought, where do I put it? How do I tag it? How do I log it? How do I name it? That's a process which you're not totally aware of, but that's happening inside your brain. And the bigger problem is it can lead to burnout, overwhelm, anxiety, and stress. So there's a lot to be thinking about. I know that I do fall into these places. I've had days where I've just had this continuous fatigue. Also, I get overwhelmed throughout the day. I know that I have a kind of a low threshold, so I get overwhelmed by stuff. And I'm very, very mindful of keeping my work in small chunks. Anxiety and stress, that's a part of life. We kind of have our stress response. So we have to recognize how that gets triggered and how to get ourselves back to a good place. During business, all of these things or some of these things might be happening for you right now. You might find that you're making poor decisions, or you're having difficult relationships, or you are experiencing stress and burnout. You might just find your productivity is low. You can't quite get started. You might be getting into conflict with people and arguments with people. It can also lead to weak leadership if you have a team of people that you work with or consultants that you work with, poor negotiation skills, trying to do the sales stuff and the sales and marketing. And the last thing I thought was very slow personal growth or no personal growth. There is another saying that if you're not growing, then you're stagnating. But that's not to put pressure on you to always be doing amazingly gigantic leaps in how you are developing yourself. It can be very tiny things that you do on a daily basis that will make a difference to you growing as a human being. And sometimes for me, it's just meeting people, having a conversation, and they say something which I had never heard before, or a word that they use that I've never heard before. And I consider that to be personal growth. So the entrepreneur's journey is to recognize these routines that we have and recognize the thoughts that we have, the habits and the patterns. And then we have to minimize them so that we can be successful in our business. I will never ever say that these things don't happen because they do happen, but I do believe you can get better at managing them. Now, the big question is, why do we think this way? Some of it is evolutionary. The stress response is a mechanism which we have to save our lives, literally. You don't want to overthink when your life's in danger. You just want to react, run. Sometimes it's hide. Whatever you need to do to save your life, that's what you're going to do in that moment. We also think this way because it's an efficient way for our brain to conserve energy. It's working out what's important, what's not important. For the big decisions that we have to make in life, we do need that energy. But if the brain is taking these shortcuts and doing what I would call these quick and dirty habits of thinking, it just goes to these three places. Deletion, it will delete the things that it doesn't like. It kind of pretends it doesn't exist. It might distort it. It doesn't like that information, but it will trim a little bit off here, make it smaller, or magnify it. And we also generalize. And generalizing is our way of taking that thought that became a belief and we turn things into rules. So it's about making rules. And it's a very, very quick way to sort things and to sift things out. And if you imagine the amount of information and data that we are taking in on a daily basis, if I put you in charge of managing my brain or you put me in charge of managing yours, I would find a shortcut for all that information coming at me. And I read recently that the amount of information that we can consume in one day with all the stuff that's around us nowadays, this knowledge, information age that we live in, someone, let's say, 2 centuries ago, they would never have had so much information coming at them. But we are consuming as much in one day as they might have consumed in their whole entire life. So we have to realize that our brain is a very old and ancient thing which hasn't caught up with the amount of information that's around us yet. Hence, we get overwhelmed. And that makes complete sense for me. The last thing is the learned behavior. We're always trying to make things predictable because that does actually just calm anxiety, but it can also put us into a place of boredom as well. We get very, very comfortable. And the reason why we are forming these habits and these patterns of thinking is, again, as I said, to make us comfortable, but we do need to have some discomfort in our lives to make us do new things. And we form a loop really of doing something and reinforcing old behaviors. This learned behavior is a very interesting place to get to as well. So, evolutionary survival, the cognitive efficiency that's required, and the learned behavior, that's all part of the human biology. Now, when it comes to spotting all of these thinking habits, there's lots of biases that we have, lots of unhelpful thinking that we have. I put 6 of them onto a slide, which is again to help you to look at the way in which you are approaching your negative automatic thinking and your routines. You might be able to see that some of these patterns are not helpful. I've written a list next to it of the black and white thinking there, dark and gloomy outlook. We can be our own worst enemy sometimes. We filter out information, which is a bit like what I was saying before, deleting things and distorting things and generalizing. We also can become quite a bit of a perfectionist. We want things to be just right. And then we can procrastinate. So it's quite interesting, I think, the relationship between perfectionism and procrastination. I find personally for me, procrastination is not that I'm trying to be perfect. It's sometimes that I just need clarity. And again, having conversations with other business owners, I would say that's a good thing because you get a bigger perspective on how you're being. The business owner said to me last week, Joyce, what you probably need is clarity. And I thought, they're probably right. I'm hesitating on doing this, not because I can't do it, but because I haven't quite worked out the steps on how to do it. So that's an interesting spin. And the last thing is predictive thinking. And this PDF is available for you as well. I've dropped the link into the chat box for you. Do you have habits and patterns that are running your life? I put in brackets, ruining your life or ruining your business. You might not be aware of it, and you may never have taken the time, I suppose, to think about it in this much detail. So that's why I like to do these talks, just to give us a little bit of a leg up and a little bit of a reminder about what's happening for us. It's always good to look at solutions, and I would never, ever leave any of my sessions without giving you some interesting solutions to look at to challenge that automatic thinking. I know that we have to start being more conscious. I know we hear about it. We talk about how can we achieve that through mindfulness, through meditation. But just remember that we are spending like 90% of our time on automatic thinking, which is an awful lot of time, and 10% on conscious awareness because it just requires so much energy. So, working out your path is going to give you an opportunity to rethink situations and to rethink whether you should be approaching things differently because your patterns are getting in the way. It's always good to question them, of course. I'd encourage you to question them and encourage you to challenge them. And when I say that, I call it breaking a trance. I always imagine people walking around, sleepwalking, with all of this automatic thinking without realizing that it's a problem. And so it's about breaking the trance that you can get into, and repeating a thought over and over again is how we make it a belief. That's a way of inducing a trance, just a repetition of one particular thought. You may agree, you may disagree, and we can talk about that at the end. I would love to hear your spin on that too. So, the first exercise, in order to break this kind of automatic cycle that we get into, is to flip a coin. Now, it might sound a bit weird. You're thinking, Joy, what are you talking about? But get a coin. Why does a coin have two sides? That might be a good question. But I think it gives you two perspectives. So when you're stuck in one perspective, and this can be the black and white thinking that we can get stuck into, it's my way or the highway, or you're right and I'm wrong, or you're wrong and I'm right, whichever way you want to look at it, try and get another perspective on things. And that means, how else could I look at this? So you've got a problem in front of you. How else could I look at it? Just find one more answer. That's going to be a good way to break the cycle that you've got stuck in. The second exercise, which I do love using, is getting a beach ball. Now, I'm sure you'll have used a beach ball or seen a beach ball. This one's got 6 colors on it, which is useful. Now, imagine if I blew that up and I put it in the room. So, me and you in the room where you are right this minute, and you stood on one side of it and I stood on the other side. And I shouted out to you, what color is the beach ball? You might say, it's red, Joy. I say, oh, that's strange. It's orange from where I'm standing. So I ask you to move around the room, just shift yourself around to the left or the right, and I'll do the same. And I ask you the same question. What color is this beach ball? You might shout it, it's now green, Joy. I say, oh, that's strange. I think it's now blue. But what's happening is that we are guilty, I suppose, of seeing things from our own perspective. It's always good to ask people what their perspective is, but also to recognize that there are other ways of looking at things. So I think this is a step up from using the coin. You now got 6 different perspectives that you could look at. And remember, this is about opening up your self-awareness and giving you a chance to grow and giving you a chance to be more innovative, all the things required for business. And the last exercise is about probability. When things happen, we think they're 100% true and it's always going to happen. I'm thinking, well, what's the likelihood of something happening again? The fact that you had a really bad rainstorm last week, or the fact that you fell ill last week and you'd never had that sickness before, and then you start worrying about things. I would ask you to question the likelihood of something happening, automatic thinking and feeling that that's the way things are going to be. I want you to break that chain for starters, but also what's the likelihood or the probability of something happening? This gives you at least a way to assess that, yes, it's likely that it's going to happen again and you can prepare for it and you can make all the arrangements that you need to, or you can recognize that actually it's not going to happen again and you can let go of that thought, get your energy back and save energy, conserve energy. So I hope that makes sense. Always ask yourself good questions. There's a range of questions that you could ask, but these are very simple ones. Um, is this 100% true? It's a bit like the probability. What's the probability of this being true? And you can rate that one. It gives you a new way to assess something so it doesn't feel so overpowering and so overwhelming. Another question you could ask is, will I feel like this tomorrow? Or will I feel like this in the next hour? When you start to project ahead and start using your imaginations, you realize that this is not something that's going to last forever, which is a good thought to come to because, again, it relieves anxiety. I know that my 7-year-old self, she's always present. And that might sound like a strange concept to some of you, but there's a junior part of us which is still a part of us. And they have all their thoughts at play, which are now our thoughts. And sometimes we haven't dropped any of those thoughts. I have mentioned that this 7-year-old, sometimes I take her to work and she can be the one that's running things. She's the one that's very worried about things. And I have to be that grown up self to calm her down and to get her to do the flipping the coin or looking at the beach ball or considering the probability of things, just to talk her down. And it's coming from a place of being frightened and being scared. It can be scarred. There are scars there. There's lots of things going on in human beings. We forget that entrepreneurs are still human beings and then we are business owners second. So everything that happens is normal. Okay. We just have to understand it so that we can use that to run our businesses and be better. Now, a couple of the other questions are asking yourself, are you in danger? Always a good idea to do that. It might be true. There could be some real danger. But I encourage you to look out for animals, wild animals, look out for flood, look out for fire. You use your senses to ground you so that you can either agree that there's a problem or actually say there is no problem because I cannot sense anything, I cannot see anything. And that can give you a chance to calm down. And the last thing is put yourself in their shoes. So I like Oprah Winfrey. I also am very proud of my mum and my dad. Sometimes I could say, what would my mum say about this or my dad say about this? What would Oprah say about this? Or if there's someone else that you admire, what would your best friends say about this? This gives you again another perspective. So that's a good way of shifting again out of automatic negative thoughts. And like I said, entrepreneurs, we just need to recognize when this is happening so that we can minimize the impact that it's having on our business. It's important in business for us to consider the way that we think because we want to have better decision making. We want to have great relationships. We want to be more productive. We want to have better stress management. We want to deal with conflicts as quickly as we can. We want to improve our leadership. And even if that's the leadership of one, that's ourselves, that's important. And then if we work with consultants and other people that do bits, other tasks for us, again, we are in a leadership position at that point in time. We want to improve our communication, have better negotiation skills, manage our reputation as well, because I think the conflict and the getting angry, it can ruin reputations in an instant. Really, really important to grow in business in whatever ways you think you need. I join an awful lot of courses and things to improve my sales, sometimes to improve website design, SEO, all these things which come up in business. I'm not afraid to learn the things that I need to learn. So I think we're getting to the end. I want you to redo that assessment again very, very quickly for me. Do you believe that you have harmful automatic thinking habits? I want you to re-rate that on a scale of 1 to 10. Don't really think you have it, or you really do. And I will look in the comments and just see if you've changed your rating. So Lynetta says she can relate to the 7-year-old self who's been running the show. Thank you, Lynette. I quite agree with that one. So you have got a 9, Leo. Thank you very much. You do believe that you have harmful thinking patterns. Not sure if anyone's rating has changed or shifted, but if it has moved, it would be a good thing if it goes up. So you're becoming more aware. Before and afters are good. They work very well when they're showing diets, people that have lost weight, but they also work quite well when we're assessing our thinking. Are we improving our growth? Am I improving? So in summary, I hope I've covered some of the areas that I said I would, which was looking at automatic thinking. And it's because you're not consciously thinking. You're going back into your subconscious and you're pulling out all the patterns and habits that are there and running on automatic again because it saves time. It's also a biological phenomenon because we need to survive. And then it becomes a learned behavior. And I hope that I've also helped you to raise your self awareness around this and given you some resources, which are in the chat as well. So there's those PDF on the 6 thinking habits, negative thinking habits. There's another one, the 40 thoughts that an entrepreneur might have. They're just ways of me trying to help you to think about what's happening. But I think we're getting to the end of that. Little poem at the end. I'll read it very, very quickly. Be careful of your thoughts, for your thoughts become your words, and be careful of your words because your words become your actions. Be careful of your actions because your actions become your habits. And be careful of your habits because your habits become your character. And be careful of your character because your character becomes your destiny. That's powerful. It's almost saying what you think you become. And if you do a lot of spiritual growth development, it begins to make sense. We can only be the result of our actions. And if it starts with a thought, then we are creating our actions by mismanaging our thoughts. And these are some details on my email address, my website address. There's also LinkedIn. Please contact me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. It's always great to have new acquaintances there. I have a YouTube channel where part 1 and part 2 of this series, you can get hold of that. The links, contact me by all means and just say, could I have the replay for part 1, part 2? I will send that through to you. And Navigating Stress, I think it's still a good read. I had a good read of it the other day. I kept it really simple so it could be understood. And there were some good pointers on things to do to get around your stress response, things to do when you basically want to stop worrying. Lots and lots of ideas around just basically managing your stress. I do know that there are going to be some questions that you'll want to ask. And so at this point, I will stop the recording and I will start sharing